The cursed air of whispering hollow lingered around us as we huddled in our tents, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Ethan, Liam, and I sat in a circle, our breaths coming in shallow, frantic gasps. My hand was still trembling where I had felt those icy fingers, and I couldn't shake the image of that spectral figure from my mind. It wasn't just the ghostly appearance of it, though that was enough to send shivers down my spine. It was a sensation of its touch, the chill of death itself seeping into my bones. Ethan had been the first to speak after I had screamed, the sound still echoing in the night air. "Kara, what did you see?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief, yet laced with an undercurrent of fear that I hadn't expected. I could barely form words. I was still shaken, my heart thudding in my chest. I don't know. I saw something, someone, a figure, pale and thin, and it was whispering something. I couldn't understand it, but it wasn't human. I felt it touch me. Liam had been more skeptical at first. He always was, ever the practical one. "You probably just had a bad dream, Kara. Maybe the wind blew something past the tent. That's all." But deep down, even he couldn't deny the tension that clung to the forest around us. The quietness was wrong. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the chirping insects, had disappeared, replaced by a suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Even the air itself felt thicker, heavier, like it was holding its breath. We decided to try to sleep, but none of us could relax. Every creak of the trees in the wind, every rustle of leaves outside our tents made us jump. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my tent, listening for any hint of movement, any sign that the thing from the night before was still out there, waiting. At some point during the night, I must have dozed off, because I woke with a start. The sky was still dark, but the familiar weight of dread had shifted, deepened, as if something had changed. Something had followed us. I crawled out of my tent to find Ethan and Liam already awake, sitting by the campfire, the blue glow from the night before I'd returned, faint but unmistakable, flickering between the pines in the distance. "Not again," Liam muttered, his voice trembling despite his attempts to remain calm. Ethan stood up, scanning the tree line. "We need to figure out what's going on. This isn't just some weird coincidence. Something's happening here." I didn't want to go closer to the glow, but a sense of compulsion, something I couldn't explain, pushed me forward. It was as if the forest itself was calling to us. Without a word, we gathered our flashlights and began walking toward the flickering light. The closer we got, the more palpable the tension in the air became. The light pulsed, a soft, unnatural blue, drawing us deeper into the woods. We moved in silence, each of us feeling the weight of the curse settling around us. As we ventured farther from camp, the trees seemed to close in on us, their gnarled branches reaching down like skeletal hands. We finally reached the source of the light, an ancient oak, its bark twisted and gnarled, standing in the center of a clearing. The blue glow emanated from a crack in its trunk, faint at first, but growing stronger as we approached. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. I could only stare at the oak, mesmerized by the glow, by the overwhelming sense of dread that had taken hold of me. Then I noticed something strange. Carved into the bark of the tree, just below the crack, were symbols. They looked ancient, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Before I could say anything, Liam stepped forward, his hand reaching out as if to touch the glowing crack. "Wait, don't." I began to warn him, but was too late. As his fingers brushed the bark, a sudden, ear-piercing screech echoed through the forest, louder than any animal sound. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest as my heart nearly stopped. The ground beneath us trembled, and the blue light flared brightly, casting long shadows across the clearing. The next thing I knew, Liam was on the ground, his body twitching violently. Ethan rushed to his side, but I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my eyes wide as I watched something or someone emerge from a tree. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even human. It was a shape, a collection of shadows that twisted and wriggled as if it were made of smoke. The figure loomed above us, its shape shifting, growing taller, until it towered over us, dark eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "You've disturbed the hollow," a voice hissed. It was a whisper, but it felt like a scream, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. The words weren't in any language I recognized, but I felt them in my bones. Liam stopped twitching, his body going still as the thing turned toward him. With a jerky motion, the creature reached out, its tendrils wrapping around his body, pulling him into the tree. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the dense forest, as though the very air itself refused to let my voice escape. The thing turned its gaze on me and Ethan. Its eyes burned into our souls. I could feel the darkness closing in, pressing against my mind. The creature was ancient, something older than time itself, and it was hungry. A sharp, sudden cry broke the trance that had held me captive. Ethan was pulling me away, dragging me back toward the edge of clearing. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from the tree, from Liam's body, now entwined in the roots, his face twisted in agony. "We need to get out of here," Ethan gasped, tugging me along. I didn't argue. I couldn't. We ran, but the forest seemed to shift, twisting it on itself, making every step feel longer, every shadow seemed darker. The trees groaned as if in warning, their limbs creaking under an invisible weight. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the clearing, breathless and frantic. The blue glow was gone, replaced by the still, suffocating silence that had hung over the forest. "Liam, he's gone," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. But even as the words left his lips, I knew the curse hadn't claimed its final price. The forest had tasted our fear, and now it would follow us. It would never let us leave. As we stumbled back to camp, the ground beneath us seemed to shift with every step. It was only then that I understood the full weight of the curse we had disturbed. The forest had been waiting for us, and now it would not rest until it claimed us all. The thing from a tree had left its mark, and we couldn't escape it, not even if we tried. We had a year, according to the warning etched in the bark of the tree. But I didn't know if I had the strength to face whatever was coming for us next. I just hoped it wouldn't be too late. I had always been the curious one. David, my older brother, was a cautious type, constantly reminding me of the warnings that surrounded us. Stay away from Blackthorn Woods. The locals had said, their voices heavy with mix of concern and fear. There's something in those woods, something you don't want to mess with. The Shadow Man's out there. I had laughed it off, of course. How could I take such superstition seriously? We were in Oregon, not some backwater village in a horror movie. But as I glanced over at David's uneasy face while we set up camp, I knew he wasn't so sure. It was supposed to be a simple family camping trip. Just the four of us, me, David, our parents, enjoying the natural beauty of the mountains. But we had been warned. When we first arrived, a few of the locals had looked at us with strange, knowing glance, as if they recognized something about our presence. We brushed it off at first, chalking it up to small-town eccentricities, until the warnings started coming in earnest. They're right to be scared, David had said, voice low as we huddled together near the campfire that first night. Blackthorn Woods is cursed. I can feel it. I think you watch too many horror movies, I teased, poking aside. But I saw the way his eyes darted to the shadows of the trees just beyond the campfire's glow. The flickering light did nothing to chase away the unsettling darkness in the woods. But we weren't here to spend our days in fear. We were here to explore. I could see the temptation in David's eyes as I suggested we take a walk the next morning. I had heard about a hidden trail near the edge of the forest, one that led to an abandoned hunter's cabin. It was said to be a place where no one dared to venture, but we were different. The warnings didn't faze us. We were going to find it. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? I had coaxed. I don't know. This place feels wrong, David muttered. But his feet still followed mine as we wandered off the main trail. Soon, the trees grew thick around us, and the air turned heavy, the silence broken only by the crunch of fallen leaves beneath our boots. It didn't take long to find the trail. The overgrown path twisted deeper into the forest, and I felt a strange thrill in my chest as we ventured farther away from camp. The deeper we went, the less natural it all felt. The trees here were twisted, their gnarled roots creeping up from the earth like skeletal fingers. The air felt damp, suffocating even. Yet, I pressed on, determined to uncover what lay ahead. And then we found it, the cabin. It wasn't much to look at, really. Just a small, dilapidated structure hidden away in a forgotten corner of the woods. The wood was warped, and the roof sagged under the weight of years of neglect. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but there was something strange about it. Something unsettling about how it seemed to draw us in like a magnet. "Anna, let's go back." David's voice was tight, his eyes flickering nervously to the shadows beyond the cabin. He was right to be scared. There was something off about this place. But my curiosity had already taken hold. "No way," I said, grinning. "This is exactly what we came for. Let's just check it out." We stepped inside the cabin, the door creaking as it opened. The smell inside was stale and musty, the remnants of something long forgotten. The walls were covered in grime and old hunting trophies. Deer heads mounted on the walls, their glass eyes staring blankly into space. A chill ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off. I explored the cabin, poking through the remnants of old furniture and forgotten supplies. A single window was cracked, and through it I could see the trees pressing in like they were trying to swallow the cabin whole. It felt like the forest was alive, watching us. "Anna, we need to go." David's voice was urgent now. "This place gives me the creeps." I nodded, finally getting the sense that maybe we had overstayed our welcome. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a small, tattered hunting coat, hanging from a hook by the door. It looked as though it had been left behind by whoever once lived here, but the longer I stared at it, the more wrong it felt. It was like the coat was waiting for someone, waiting for us. We made our way back to camp, and that's when we saw him. At first, I thought it was just another hiker, someone else who had wandered too far off the beaten path. But then I saw the way he moved. There was something unnatural about it. He walked with an eerie, shuffling gait, his body wrapped in an old, tattered hunting coat that seemed to have been torn apart by time itself. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but there was no mistaking the rotten, decayed smell that clung to him. It was as if he had stepped out of the very earth itself, a spirit of decay walking among the living. David's hand gripped my arm. "Anna, we need to get back to camp. Now!" We tried to run, but every time we looked back, the figure was still there, following us silently, his footsteps in sync with our own. I could feel the air growing heavier around us, thick with something dark and malevolent. It was as if the woods themselves were closing in. When we reached our campsite, I breathed a sigh of relief. But that relief was short-lived. Our tents had been torn to shreds. All our belongings scattered across the ground, shredded beyond recognition. And the smell of rot, of something dead, lingered in the air. David looked at me, eyes wide with terror. "What happened? What did we do?" I had no answer. I couldn't explain it. That night, we huddled in the wreckage of our tent, trying to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear him. The shadow man, the whispers. They came from the trees, low and menacing, like a voice that had been forgotten by time, but never forgotten by the woods. I could feel his presence, as though he were standing just behind me, waiting. David woke me in the middle of the night, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Anna, he's here. He's standing right outside the tent." I turned to look, but there was nothing there, just a shadow of the trees in the moonlight, stretching unnaturally long and thin. "We need to leave," David urged, panic creeping into his voice. But when we tried to start the car the next morning, it wouldn't turn over. The engine sputtered, but nothing more. We were trapped. The forest was closing in, and I could hear the whispers again, closer this time. We spent the day in a daze, terrified, unable to escape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows grew deeper, and we knew it was only a matter of time before the shadow man would come for us. In the morning, the rangers found us. Our faces were frozen in terror, our bodies stiff with fear. The camp had been abandoned, and the forest seemed unnaturally silent. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the bodies of other campers, those who had ignored the warnings before us, who had dared to wander into Blackthorn Woods. They hadn't been so lucky. The shadow man had taken them, just as he would take us if we weren't careful. The cabin had been burned down years ago, but the curse, whatever it was, still remained, and it wasn't done with us yet. David and I learned the hard way that some warnings should never be ignored. Some spirits never rest. And the Shadow Man, it seemed, would always be waiting,